I got asked what I describe as did I have like 10 shows of the 80s that I would say that were the best TV shows? That's a hard thing to really narrow it down. There were shows that come to mind, you know, obviously the impact of Dallas, J.R. Ewing and Ewing Oil, that was huge. I mean, it's kind of hard because the Who Shot J.R., that was huge in the early 80s. And that until they did the Bobby Ewing in the shower that they jumped the shark, Dallas was running things. And then Dynasty was huge. That was one of the I'd say Dallas and Dynasty were two of the most compelling shows because you had to have a 80s TV, especially the early, you had to have a good soap opera. You had to have a whole lot of family conflict, a lot of drama. The kind of stuff that later made a recipe for the Jerry Springer show, you had to have that. And Dallas and Dynasty were two of the best to do that. So if I use that as a full print, I would say that. The Cosby Show was an incredible show. No matter what anyone comes down on Bill Cosby or what they say, I'm calling cap and crunch because y'all was crunching and munching the Cosby Show back in the day. Call it cap if you be acting like you don't remember that he was America's TV's dad, that they loved him and that they loved him. I liked the Cosby Show. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I liked it, and it was a great show. Even though John Amos was more of my TV dad, if I was gonna say that for as a TV dad, but make no mistake about it, it was a very important show. I'd say that was one of the best shows of the 80s. I would say the Jeffersons was as well because it continued its run from the 70s to the mid 80s. And George and Wheezy were household names, iconic. They never got their full due for what they did as a couple and the business and what they represented. And of course, Tom and Helen Willis breaking racial barriers as a couple and so on. So that was one of the best. I think those were one of the best shows. I think obviously when MASH went out there, that was a huge show in the 80s. I think that show definitely had an impact. I think that it left a lasting imprint because it was a continuous show from the 70s, and I will view it more because of when it ended, not when it started. But it had a strong impact in the 80s. So those shows, 60 Minutes, even though it was a long running show, it was impactful in the 80s as well because it was news journalists and it held its own. And it's hard to argue with something that you watched. That was important. Miami Vice was another important show. Crockett and Tubbs was big, and the black cop, white cop. That never goes out of style. It definitely hit big with that, and it worked with the stylings on Miami and everything. Moonlighting with Bruce Willis, Sybil Shepherd was a big show. Any of these cop detective kind of shows were really cool. Murder She Wrote with Angela Lansbury, that was a big show. Soap operas, people coming back and recurring themes. Those kind of shows always had ratings and people loved those shows. The Golden Girls, obviously, that was one of the big shows back in the day. B. Arthur and the Crew, Betty White, all that. I mean, that was a huge show. And these shows were iconic and they had a lasting impact. They had a tone, they had a feel. And they just were able to withstand they and again, if I'm just going based on shows that within that, I'm just talking about that. Some people, Magnum PR was a big show. Tom Selleck was huge, with the red Ferrari, the whole nine. That was iconic. Knight Rider was big with David Hasselhoff. So you had a car, you had the lead person. People watched those shows. Those shows were big, and they were iconic, and they had their place. So again, there was pardon me, a potpourri of different shows. You had to have a soap opera. You had to have like a comedy theme because that's kind of like something like Cheers was big. That had its place. And we had like what we call kind of repressed kind of humor vibe, which took over, but it had its place in that era. So those are some of the best shows of the 80s. Tell me the shows that you thought were the best shows of the 80s. Feel free to give me the comments below. Please hit like, subscribe, welcome thoughts, comments, and I do respond. Thank you. Wash your hands, keep your mind clear, watch out for another. Share the video if you like and hit that membership because when you do request videos like this come true, stay safe, stay blessed, stay woke, stay free. I'm out. Peace.